Okay, David, introduce yourself to our listeners. Just tell them a little bit about yourself and where you live.
I'm David Boone. I live on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State, the northwesternmost corner of the continental United States. We live in the mountains along a beautiful river, 2 miles from salt water. It's very beautiful and lots of nature here. And my wife and I own a business that we've run for 40 years. It's an internet business. And I created a book back in 2011. And her book changed my life. The Lord intervened into my life when I read her book and did a mighty work in me, and continues to. But it was supernatural. It was just amazing.
But I want the people to listen and learn. You know, it's nighttime in Africa. David and his wife, and he was telling me about the, as he calls it, the natural experience what he had with the book. Now, what the book is not the thing; it is the Spirit of God that are operating. You know, the Word of God says the letter kills, but the Spirit brings life. Now, David, what fascinates me about your story is the life that you live and how you struggle to find answers in life. Am I right?
That's correct.
And you know, the story gives so much hope to so many people. That is one of the reasons I want to speak to you. Will you tell us about what happened in life?
Well, when I was going to high school, I started using drugs and I started smoking. And that led to a lifestyle that continued through my life. I stepped away from that for maybe 10 years when I got in trouble with the law and was forced to change my ways. But the thing is, if you don't do the heart work, if you don't do the spirit work, if you don't have a relationship with the Lord, you end up going back, like the Bible says, like a dog returning to his vomit. So I ended up drifting back into that lifestyle, and I made so many mistakes. I was doing drugs for probably 30 years, and it turned into smoking crack cocaine and methamphetamine, which is a couple of the worst. And I came to a point in my life where I realized I was losing everything. My business, my wife was fed up. She didn't know what was going on. All she knew was there was chaos. I was a really good liar. That's one thing. I was a really accomplished liar. I always had been from a little child. And so she didn't know it was a drug problem. She just thought it was a behavior problem. I was gone for days at a time with that lifestyle, you know, disappearing and coming home and crashing on the couch for a couple of days and having crazy stories. That was my life. And I came to a point where I realized I'm going to end up with nothing. And I've got a wonderful wife and wonderful children. And I had a great business that was beginning to fail, and everything was just going sideways. And I wanted to quit. I tried many times to quit, but my own efforts failed. Well, I'll tell you, the first key was God had sent somebody, because God knows the end from the beginning. God had sent somebody to my business a few years before things shifted. He sent someone all the way from Ohio, thousands of miles. God just put it on this guy's heart for he and his wife to come visit us. He was a kind of a business associate. And he came and shared testimonies of God answering prayers for him. He had a healing ministry. He was a businessman, but he had a healing ministry. And he shared these testimonies with me. And they really impacted me, because I had never heard of anyone being healed in the church I grew up in. Nobody talked about any miracles or answers to prayers or nothing. And so I was impacted by that. I always had an interest in God. And I was raised in church, but I just didn't see any power in the church that I grew up in. And sex, drugs, and rock and roll took charge of my life when I was growing up because of that. Because the church just, you know, I thought it was a really wonderful story about Jesus, and I thought it was too bad he had to die. I didn't understand the name.
David, can
And
I just, one moment? Will you just come a little bit closer, speak a little bit louder? People cannot hear you. Thanks.
and so my life was chaos. It was absolute chaos because of all the drugs. But I came to a point where I realized I need some help. So I called this man up. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I called this man up in Ohio, and I told him, his name is Doyle. Doyle, my life is, I've got some chaos going on in my life. I didn't tell him what it was all about. I just said, I need restoration, is what I told him. Would you pray with me? And I believe it was God that gave me that desire to call him, because I believe God sent him to testify about the goodness of himself, of God, to me, so I'd have that memory. So I called him up and I said, Doyle, I need to have you pray with me. I got a bunch of stuff going on. I knelt down in my office and I prayed, and Doyle led me through it. And pretty simple prayer. It was one for restoration in all areas of my life. And that was it. And the first thing that I noticed was about 3 weeks later, I got busted for I was in either the wrong place at the wrong time or the right place at the right time, depending on how you look at it. Because I was wanting to change, I recognized I was at the right place at the right time. And I recognized that this was divine intervention. This was God's way of helping me out of my addiction. And I even told the arresting officer that as he's taking me to jail. I said, this is divine intervention. That he probably thought I was whacked out. I probably was, but God, I think God had whispered this to me in my ear, because you don't usually tell an arresting officer something like that. But I spoke it out, and me hearing myself say that, I believe it calmed my spirit. So I ended up getting into a therapeutic court. And a therapeutic court, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a court where instead of being sentenced to jail, if you plead guilty to your charges and you go to a therapeutic court, they give you treatment. It's a 1-year program. And when you complete that, they toss the charges. Your record gets wiped clean. So I began this program, and about 3 or 4 months into it, because of the way the program was designed at that time, it's changed now. You could, if you were a cheater, which I was a cheater, you could use drugs on a Thursday after your last class, maybe for one night, and then by day you again, that means urine analysis. They could check your pee to see if you had any illicit material in there. You could get by with that. So I did that a few times, and I got caught, and they sent me to jail, and they decided to send me to inpatient in Spokane. Well, I'm in jail, and I'm just tormented with the thought that I'm in jail, first of all, and that I hadn't been able to complete this 12-month program. So I get on the bus, they take me to Spokane, and on the way to Spokane, I just had the realization of just how desperate my situation was. I'd given a wonderful opportunity to change my life with this court program, 1-year program, and I hadn't been able to I had not been able to comply. I couldn't do it for 1 year. And I thought, what a loser I was. And I had the realization, maybe I wasn't going to be able to complete this program, and I would end up being a drug addict and losing my family and my business. And the awful reality just swept back upon me. And I thought of all the bad things I'd done, just all the guilt and the shame, and how I would never feel worthy again. Even if I wasn't doing drugs, I had this knowledge of all the horrible things I'd done, all the lies I'd told my wife, and I was a mess. I was a real mess. But I got off. Here's where the story begins to change. Once again, I got off the bus, and there's a huge rock at the bus station with a bronze plaque that's inlaid into it. It's called the Wishing Rock. And so I'm waiting for my ride from the treatment center, and I leaned up against that rock, and I thought, oh, Wishing Rock. And I impulsively made a prayer. It was a really simple prayer. I said, God, if there's anything you could do, That was my prayer. And the power of simple prayers is wonderful, because I noticed, thinking back over the years, I've thought about this, but as soon as I said that little prayer, my attitude and my mental status changed, and I had hope. And I got in the car. The man came, picked me up, take me to the treatment center about 10 miles away. And I believe it was the Lord that told me, when I go into this treatment center, to introduce yourself to everyone. Because, you know, when you're struggling from addiction, at least for me, when I was struggling, I isolated. And so for me to go in and introduce myself to people was not in my nature, but I believe it was God that gave me that thought. And so I did. I listened to that idea, and as I'm walking in, I'm introducing myself. Hi, I'm David. I'm the new guy. And what came of that was, the next day, I'd see people in the hall, and I go, "Oh, hi, David." And it just made me feel, it was a small thing, but it made me feel better, more secure. And so the next really amazing thing that happened in this treatment was, 2 weeks into it, we took a walk to a park where some people played basketball. I just took a nap. But when I woke up from my nap, all my shame and my guilt was gone. It was washed away in that 10-minute nap. And it was tangible to have that great burden gone. And it was like waking up, like being a little kid again after being a horrible criminal. The difference was just so amazing. And I remember sharing that with my counselor, with just my experience. And I think, he looked at me like I had 3 eyeballs. He didn't get it at all. I understood what it was, that it was a miracle, because it was, to have that weight gone. It was like, wow, I can't believe it. So I wrote a letter to the drug court team, and I told them, hey, I lied to you about my UA. I really did get high because I told them some crazy tale. And of course, they've heard every crazy tale there is, because they're working with drug addicts. And I just told them that I wanted to be honest and, get on with the program. And I found out later that they read that letter in the drug court. They didn't tell me that, but I heard it from another participant years later, actually. It's funny how things come back to you and you find out about them. I was encouraged to hear that. So another thing I noticed is, when I was finished with treatment, and treatment went really well, I actually had some ideas to help out at the treatment center to make the treatment center, I wanted to help. I suddenly had this heart where I wanted to help. So I went in and talked to management and offered to help them with what I called a wingman program, where the new people that came in, there'd be somebody that'd been there a while, would kind of take them under their wing for a couple of days. And that was my idea, to help there. But anyway, when I was released to go back to the Olympic Peninsula, when this kind of a thing happens, you're returned to the jail for one night, and then you're released from jail the next morning. But when I went back to the jail, I noticed all the jailers were really nice. I thought, wow, what happened to these jailers? They weren't like this before. They just seemed like good people doing their jobs. And I recognized, I don't know when, but pretty quickly on, that it was me that changed. It wasn't the jailers. They'd always been who they were. It was me that, instead of looking at people with suspicion and fear, I was looking at them with a different set of different lenses. And so I went back into drug court, finished the program, actually recognized what a really good program it was for a secular program. It was really good. Their heart is in it. They really want to see people succeed, but of course it's rarely successful long term if people don't come into a relationship with the Father through Jesus Christ, because you'll just end up, maybe you won't be an addict or an alcoholic, but you'll still have all kinds of problems, character problems. And at the end of the story, where are you going to go? That's the big question. You may have been sober for the rest of your life, but hey, where are you going to spend eternity? So,
yeah, good question.
Yeah, that's the key. Is it worth it just to, go to meetings for the rest of your life, for secular meetings, and be sober and be satisfied with that kind of life, but end up going to the not good place because you didn't take that free ticket that Christ offers? So anyway, the thing is, I had these answers to prayer that were life-changing, but I didn't have the knowledge, I didn't have the wisdom to press into that relationship and, water the seeds that have been planted. Mm-hmm. I didn't put myself in the presence of people that could disciple me. So what happened was, within a couple of years, I started using again, just a couple of times. But I recognized this is not good. I could very well end up, and it won't take very long, right back where I was a couple of years ago. But I didn't know how to quit. I mean, I knew how to quit. Let me step back for a second. About this time, a good friend of ours, of my wife and I, she asked me when she was visiting us once, she said, "David, who do you think Jesus was?" And the way she asked the question was such that I thought she wanted an answer for herself. So me being kind of a researcher, I thought, that's a pretty good question to find the answer to. And at that stage of my life, I wasn't sure anymore because I'd been exposed to all kinds of heresies, that you'd call them now, all kinds of fake Christianity and paganism, shamanism, witchcraft. All that stuff's got power. I just didn't realize where that stuff got its power from. And, New Age stuff, UFOs, all that stuff. I was really interested in all that stuff. And so I decided, that's a good question to find the answer to. I better check that one out. So I did some reading, and I don't think I went to the Bible. I think I went to maybe More Than a Carpenter, which is a really well-known about Jesus for the secular world, and Mere Christianity. I read some books, a couple of books, and I realized, hey, that guy was who he said he was. But that still didn't change things. During this time that I was going to drug court, I would be in my car maybe 4 hours a week. So I started listening to podcasts, and I was really interested in people who died and what their experiences were. And there's a vast body of work in these days of people who've died and been resuscitated, or maybe they just came back on their own. And so I thought it's a pretty good thing to find out what happens when you die. And I read a lot of books about people who went to heaven, a lot of people who went to hell. And I realized the way you live your life dictates on where you're going to go after you die. So I wanted to go to heaven. I didn't want to go to hell because I knew I'd see all my drug using friends in hell. I didn't want to spend eternity with them. It wasn't that much fun being with them here. And I didn't want to spend eternity with them while my family was in heaven. So I realized if I could quit smoking tobacco, I could quit smoking dope. Because tobacco was the one thing that I was not able to quit. I could quit drugs. I was able to do that for months and months at a time, for a year at a time. But tobacco, I could never quit that for more than a couple of weeks, and I would go back to it. That was the first drug I took as a kid. And tobacco and nicotine is a drug. And so I recognized that was the gateway for marijuana, for the other drugs, and for smoking the other drugs. I didn't know how to quit the tobacco. I tried hypnotism, Chantelle, the patches. I tried all that stuff, and nothing really worked. But I made that connection. If somehow I could quit smoking, I wouldn't do dope anymore. Well, right about this time, I was listening to a late night radio show. It's called Coast to Coast AM, and it's pretty famous worldwide. And I was listening to this show, and a man called in and said, "Get this book, Heaven from Hell. Get this book, Message from God. Heaven and Hell Are Real." It's about a family from South Africa whose little boy gets killed in a car crash, and he goes to heaven and meets Jesus. Well, it's like this man was speaking to me. I went to my computer. I found that book on Amazon. I ordered it up, and within a week, I suppose, I had it. And I started to read it, and I finished the book. And the night before I finished the book, my wife was out of town, and I got high. This is maybe the third time I'd gotten high in a year or so, a couple of years. But I'd gotten high the night before. So I was deep in my misbehavior when this happened. But the next morning I woke up and I finished reading a book. And I went outside on my front porch to load my tobacco pipe. And as I'm loading my tobacco pipe, I hear myself say these words. They didn't come out of my brain. They just came out of my mouth. I
Out
said,
of your
out of my spirit, Jesus doesn't want a bride that smokes. And when I heard that, I heard myself say that. I was kind of a joker. I said, and this is to show you how unrenewed my mind was. I said, that's some funny shit. Jesus doesn't want a bride that smokes. But then I stopped for a moment. I thought, I don't feel like smoking. Now, if you're a smoker or you know a smoker, smokers are always ready to smoke. And to suddenly have the feeling like I don't want to smoke, that is a profound, noticeable miracle. And so I thought, that's interesting. Never felt like smoking. Never felt like not smoking before. So it was about 11-ish in the morning on Saturday, November 5th, 2011. And I walked off the porch, and it was in about an hour, there was going to be an AA meeting. So I thought, well, I'll go to the AA meeting because that's what I did sometimes, get high the night before and then go to an AA meeting. I went to the meeting, and years later, a friend of mine who goes to that meeting said, yeah, you came into that place and looking like a $2 coat with $5 buttons for eyes, because there was a noticeable difference in my outward appearance. I'd been touched by the Lord. And so after the meeting, I'm outside and people are smoking, and it smelled really good. And the thing about AA meetings and tobacco is, if you've ever tried quitting tobacco, you're probably going to relapse at the end of an AA meeting because everybody smokes outside. But I noticed it's really good, but I didn't feel like smoking. I thought, wow, that is really odd. So the next morning, which was Sunday, I'm taking a shower and I'm thinking, wow, what happened yesterday? Oh, plus on Saturday, I had 2 pounds of tobacco. So I was a dyed-in-the-wool. I was a dedicated smoker. So I had 2 pounds of tobacco. I used to buy pipe tobacco. It's cheap that way. And Saturday, I gave half my tobacco away because I felt in my spirit something's different. But I'd done that many times before with drugs and tobacco, tried to quit, give the stuff away, and then end up going back and asking for some back until my new order comes in, or, going over to somebody's house and getting high. So I kept half of it back because I wasn't sure, nothing like this had ever happened before. But the next morning I woke up, I'm taking a shower, and I'm talking to myself, thinking, what happened yesterday? Jesus doesn't want a bride that smokes. That makes me feel bad because I'm a smoker. No, wait a minute. I don't feel like smoking. Hey, that makes me feel really good. That means Jesus doesn't want me to be a smoker because he wants me to be his bride. And so that made me feel really good. But the Lord put on my heart to go to the church. And this is my local church here, which I would go to on Easter, and I go there on Christmas with my wife and my kids. Not a church I attended very often. But I felt compelled to go and testify what the Lord had done for me, which is it's interesting thinking about it. But I believe it cemented things for me. So I went to the church and I sat in the back row, and the pastor says, anybody here got a praise or a prayer request? And I stood up and said, I got a praise. I've been a smoker for 40 years. And yesterday I finished reading this book, Message from God. And I told him the story. I went outside and smoked my pipe and heard myself say these words: Jesus doesn't want a bride that smokes. And now I don't feel like smoking. Everybody clapped, and I sat back down. And a month goes by, and I haven't even thought about smoking once. I haven't even thought about it. Now that's just impossible, unless God is, because what God did is he rewired my brain.
Yeah.
Cravings, they left and they never came back. So I went back to the church. I gave away my other pound of tobacco because I realized it's not coming back. It's a miracle. Went back to the church and said, okay, it's been 30 days, so it's definitely a miracle. I've quit many times week or two, never for a month. Quitting's not a miracle, but quitting for a month and not even thinking about it, now that's a miracle. And what happened was, I have never once since that time thought about getting high or spending time with women that I shouldn't be spending time with. God did a supernatural work on my spirit and my heart. He removed all these deep-seated things, took that great burden of addiction away from me, which allowed me to focus on the things that I could do. And that would be, to make amends with my family and people and business, and just to focus on my relationship with the Lord without being plagued with thoughts about going out and running crazy for days at a time. So the thing that I recognized is it's all about prayer. My prayers are really simple, but every time I prayed in desperation, I got the answer. But then the key is to focus on building your relationship with the Lord while he's doing these things for you. And that's what I didn't do. And I wasted some time because of that, but it added to my story. It added to my testimony and the revelation I got. And so I'm just really grateful for Retah's fulfilling her destiny by writing her book, the first book, the other books. I so appreciate her obedience to the task that the Lord put on her heart, because I'd read many books like her book, but her book was the only one that the Spirit of the Lord worked on worked with me. That book was the key right there. And I know it because of what I heard myself say, the bride and Jesus, those two words in that sentence after I finished that book. So many wonderful things have happened since then. That woke me up to the fact that Jesus loves really broken people, because I was the worst of the worst. He did that for me. And I wasn't begging on my knees, I wasn't groveling. I was just interested. I was seeking God. I got the message from God, a message from God, because I was looking for a message from God. And God honored that desire I had to have a message from him by doing that thing for me, beginning that incredible work, which he'd already begun before, but that was the most amazing thing. And I'll tell you something else too, is that woke me up to the supernatural ability of God, because it was such a mighty thing that God did that you would have thought there'd been a flash of lightning or a clap of thunder or something, but it was nothing. It was nothing for him. It was like, I don't know, maybe he just touched my head, maybe he touched my heart. I don't know what he did, but it was so subtle, but it woke me up to the miraculous. God is supernatural.
What I love about your story is the following. I'm saying, you actually are telling us, God says, come like a child. Come like a child. Childlike faith. There's nothing more important to me in life than childlike faith, just the way you are. Secondly, God says, knock, seek. And many people I see in life don't ask. He's a good father. And you book, I never once wrote that when you smoke, Jesus don't like that. But what happened is your spirit man saying to you, I'm looking for a pure bride. And you heard his spirit. So that encouraged me. And I look at your life, I know 10 years or so.
Yeah, fine.
And how you've grown year by year, closer and closer to God. And to tell the viewers how he used you now.
Oh, you broke up on me. I didn't get that. Did you ask a question?
Yes. If you can tell God use you at this moment in jail.
Oh, in the jails. Okay, so I was really so excited that God would do that for me, and I wanted to share that with people at the AA meetings, because AA at its roots was a Christian program. It came right out of Christianity, but it's kind of gotten dumbed down, and now you don't talk about Jesus at AA meetings. And so that's the first thing I started doing, is giving Jesus the credit, and at the AA meetings, and because that's my testimony. So I just tell people, hey, this is what the Lord did for me. It wasn't about going to meetings. It wasn't about reading the readings. It wasn't about getting a sponsor and working the steps, although working the steps is important. The steps are all about, doing the cleanup work. But through this, a friend of mine I knew, a woman who was in the program, she was going into the jail and sharing the AA meetings in the jail. Well, I was really disillusioned with AA because I knew so many people in AA and I was one of them, went to meetings for years, and it didn't work for me. It might work for some people, but it didn't work for me. So, and AA meetings, they go into the jail. Matter of fact, I went to an AA meeting in the jail. But I realized that what the people in the jail really need to hear is that the Lord is the one that'll set them free from their addictions. It's not about meetings. It's not even about therapeutic courts are a really good thing, but I made the decision I wanted to start speaking with the people that are in jail on drug and alcohol charges. And so I'd made this little booklet up on drug court about what a great program it was. And I got permission from the jail to take some of those booklets in, because if you combine the Spirit of the Lord working in your life, Jesus Christ washing away your guilt and your shame, along with a secular program that's going to help you become successful through the courts if you're in trouble with the law, I saw that as a great combination, a winning combination, because
Yes.
yeah. And so I began going into the jails. I would go in and I was able to get in because I had a clergy card. I did a little bit of training for healing prayer and I got ordained in Texas, and that little card got me into jail. So that's all. It stopped for the time being because of the COVID. Nobody in jail can have visitors now. It's pretty amazing. But I was able to go in and share my testimony in jail, and a number of people were touched by it, and their lives were transformed. People that I can remember, one guy in particular, I was in there talking to him, and I'm thinking, oh man, this is scary. He looks scary to me. You see some scary people in jail. But I shared my testimony with him, and he started to weep. And so I prayed with him, and what he said was, when I get out, we're gonna be good friends. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm being real here. I'm thinking, wow, I don't know about that, but I didn't want to say. And yes, we are friends now, and we do. He comes to the same church that we go to at times, and he's taken custody of his son, and he's a fine man now, and he's got a good job, and he loves the Lord, and there's others like that too, that I was able to go in and just share my testimony. Like I said, unfortunately, that's not happening right now because of the COVID. It's all locked down. But I write to people in jail. I had to do a little stint in federal prison camp because my past caught up with me. I had to go in for 6 months. But this was after I'd had my encounter with the living God who changed me. And this was after I'd done quite a bit of relationship development with the Lord. And so when I had to go into prison, the prison camp, it wasn't really prison, it was a federal prison camp. I went in with the knowledge of what God had done for me and what he would do for others. So I went in there and I was able to share my testimony and also pray with men. And it was actually the most amazing experience. I wish I could go back in for a weekend once in a while, or a week, just to be a part of that culture again, because my greatest regret from being in there was that I wasn't bolder. I was pretty bold, but I could have been bolder. And I know that some amazing things happened. I prayed for a man who was deaf in one ear. God opened his ear. I prayed for a number of people, and God healed them. And
Oh.
it was just the most amazing thing. And the thing is, before I went into prison, after I got sentenced to go to prison camp, I went to the 2 churches that I attend in this area, and I announced in the front of the church that I'd been sentenced, that I was going to go away for 6 months. But I also said, this is a missions trip. I'm going on a missions trip paid by the federal government. And it turned out to be a missions trip. And I also said, there's people in there that I need to meet. And there were people in there that I needed to meet. It was the most amazing thing. I spoke this out and it came true. There were people, actually 2 people that I'd already met, totally unrelated to drugs, that I'd met, that we came to the realization, we've already met. And it was all about God orchestrating us meeting before we both got sent to prison for different things, orchestrating it so that I would be able to encourage them, because my life had changed so much while we were in, and I've stayed in contact with a number of people and mailed in books, mailed in Bibles, Passion Translation Bibles. I've got a small prison and jail ministry, but it's just, that thing going to prison, it's, for most people, it's like, oh my gosh, it's so ashamed of that kind of thing. Well, not me. The Lord, that's the kind of thing where when walking with the Lord, things that appear to be so horrible, so much shame, so much guilt. It was awesome, really. People think I'm crazy when I tell them I had a really good time when I started. But it was really good.
I want to ask you another question, or to ask. Every time that I visit, I stand amazed about how God restores you. He restores your marriage. He restores relationships with the business associates, with people around you. He restored your guilt, the shame. He actually restored. And I can see there is no more orphan in you. You're a son. And what's the last time when I saw you guys in January was relationship with your children. If you don't want to go, you need to, but it was beautiful for me. In that time, things did happen. Even your children got hurt because some days you came home, some days you. So they also got. And how God saved your life, but He said to you, David, go and tell them you're sorry and be a. Will you tell us a little relationship with your children and your wife? And
Yes, so I wasn't a physically abusive father, and the way I communicated was with satire. I wasn't a good communicator, and satire is not an honest way to communicate. So I told my children lots. I told them that I loved them all throughout their growing up, and I was we are big huggers, and so they got that growing up. But what they didn't get was a good father figure as far as being there in their lives, and because I was gone a lot, and my son had told me, he said he recognized I had a drug problem. He said, "Have you thought about getting treatment?" He said, "Because Dad," he said, I don't want to raise kids. I don't want to have your grandkids. If you're going to be acting like this, I don't want them to see their grandfather like this." And so when he was old enough to, he left and he went to Alaska and he worked and he traveled and he left. And my daughter, as soon as she was old enough, she left. And they left right about the time that I began this process. And so I actually, right away, I apologized to him. And I told him, that I had been an addict all these years. And I asked him for forgiveness. And they both said that they forgave me. But the thing, and I've become a really, really good father and a really good grandfather. It's always easier being a good grandfather than a father. But the thing is, my son, who actually left the United States because he wanted to travel. He moved back. He married the girl next door, literally about a half a mile away. And they bought a house on the same road we live on. So he went from not wanting to be around his father because, he didn't want his kids to witness the way I used to be, to being wanting to live next to us. And we see them, multiple times a week. They're just a 5-minute walk through the woods, really. And my daughter, and I told my son everything. I just felt like I didn't want to have any illusions about who I used to be. I was really an accomplished liar, and I just wanted to know. And the reason for him, he'll be able to see the contrast about what the Lord's done through me. Now, he got saved and got into a relationship with the Lord while he was in Australia. And so I'm really, matter of fact, I've been praying, God, would you send somebody to my son that would do for him, nurture him the way that I didn't. And sure enough, he ended up working and living with someone who's a Christian down there that was able to break through that thick skin, and he turned his life over to the Lord. So his wife, he and his wife are both Christians, and it's just wonderful. And I want to say one thing. When I said that prayer with Doyle, when I was on my knees in my office, I prayed for restoration. But what really God's really done is he recreated me, because it's way beyond restoration. He's taken me into something that I could never have imagined. I'd always had kind of a twisted sense of humor, and I was all about shooting guns in the woods and blowing stuff up, and twisted sense of humor. I mean, that's who I was. And God took that away and turned me into somebody that I couldn't have imagined, actually. So he'll take you beyond restoration into recreation. And I'm just so grateful for that. So my daughter, when I worked on my little booklet on drug court, I asked for her to write something for me to put into it. And she wrote in there that it was so bad growing up that she actually had wished that I would end up getting caught and go to prison. That's how devastated she was with my lifestyle. And I had no idea about that until she handed me what she wrote. She said that she was happy that I had changed, but that's where her mindset had been all those years when she was growing up, or at least at one point. And it just made me realize how I'd hurt people that I hadn't intended to hurt. I was just doing my thing, and I had this crazy mindset where they're okay, they're taken care of. I can do what I want. I'm not hurting them, but I was hurting them. But that's the thing about drug addiction. That's mind-altering substances. It alters the way you're supposed to think. So I went to her and I told her. I told her about all the stuff that I'd done, and it really impacted her. I probably told her more than I needed to, but we have a good relationship now. She lives in Seattle. She is still seeking. She's on a path of discovery, and she has not come back to the Lord yet. So I would appreciate it if all of you would say a prayer for my daughter, and that the Lord would do for her what he's done for all of us. Because I know all of you are watching this because the Lord's done a work in your life. So I have faith. I don't have fear. How long it took me? I was 58 years old before I came into the saving grace and the knowledge of the truth of who Jesus is and what he did, and who that makes me when I accept that. So anyway, a prayer for my daughter.
Name is Sarah.
That. Sierra. Yeah.
Sierra.
Sierra. Yeah. So it's
I
good.
Know that we all.
So the Lord's just allowed me to become honest about everything. And the things that I used to have so much shame and guilt over, I speak about those things now. God's just given me the freedom to be able to do that. And I want to say something else too, speaking about freedom. When I was out running and gunning and doing all that stuff, I had an affair, and the woman got pregnant, and I paid for the abortion. And so this was something that was my deepest, darkest secret. I wasn't going to reveal that to anybody. And at one point, the Lord put on my heart to tell my wife. And it's like, really, God? Tell my wife? The last person I want to tell. But I did it, and I have such a wonderful wife. My wife is amazing. My wife is the most forgiving, open-hearted, unoffendable woman, and she's just always been focused on fixing herself. She didn't try and fix her husband. She was just always working on fixing herself. And once, see, I want to make sure I don't get sidetracked here. Anyway, I want to tell you about the abortion. I told her about that, and she knew the woman, and she was upset for just a short while, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And then she said she forgave me and she forgave her. And that, doing that thing empowered both of us to be able to speak to other people who've had that experience. And I've come to the knowledge, because of what the Lord's revealed to me, that little baby, I'll see that little baby someday. That baby's in heaven with Jesus. And I don't have any shame or guilt over that. And I was also able to call that woman up years later and just tell her that I was sorry that I had led her into that relationship. And I prayed with her over the phone, because she's a Christian now. And we just prayed, and we both repented to the Lord over the phone, and just asked for forgiveness and healing. And it was a powerful thing to be able to put closure on that. And I just wanted to share that.
It is powerful, David, what God has done in your life, my friend. And I will have a conversation with our woman needs to a God like hers, and she's one of that I met, or a few women met in my life that just had, like you say, 15 minutes, and she says, whenever I visit you guys, I come back from you, wherever I go, then I feel like I'm being ministered to. I never feel like I go there to work. I feel like I've been ministered to just by watching your life, you know, looking at how you guys treat and grown, trusting the Lord, faith. So I wanted to share your life with it. Are there any questions of anybody that they want to ask? You are welcome to write there at the bottom if you have questions to him. David, find an email address where people can find you.
I'm sorry, you broke up. What did you say?
An email address where people can find you.
Yes, my email address is my name. It's David Boone, Boone, at Embark. That's EMBARQ mail.com. Embark, like you're embarking on a trip. David Boone at embarkmail.com. I would be happy to hear from anybody.
We will put your address on the conversation on top, your email address. So if anybody wants to write you or have some questions about children, welcome to contact David, and he will be love to pray with you and this journey. Thank you. I see David, honor you for your testimony, my friend.
I want to say one other thing too. My wife and I made a decision that we wanted to get around some men and women who were, you know, deep in relationship with the Lord. We wanted to witness some physical miracles. We wanted to see the miraculous, because I had experienced that miracle in my life. And we listened to Sid Roth. A number of you probably have heard of Sid Roth, Messianic Jew who interviews men and women. Well, Retah, you were one of the most popular guests he ever had, as I recall. And so we started going out and on weekends and going to places where some of these people who he'd interviewed And my wife and I have personally witnessed the things that are spoken of in the Bible. We've seen missing limbs grow back. We've seen all kinds of miracles, and it really expanded our faith. When you see somebody who doesn't have any feet, and right in front of your eyes, after a simple prayer by a man who's got great faith, it was James Maloney in this case, we watched this woman's feet grow back. It took 45 minutes, but we watched the arches form, and then the balls of her feet, and then her toes. And when you witness that kind of thing, right then, in that moment, it's not like, well, it's life-changing. And so I want to encourage you to have faith that God does do astonishing things. He did split the Red Sea, and the Israelites went down through the water. And all those things in the Bible, I know it's true because I've seen creative miracles. My wife and I have seen creative miracles. And so I just want to encourage you with that. When you if you can get to a place where you can witness that, take the time. Instead of going out to the lake for the weekend, go to a church, someplace where somebody's visiting, is doing a healing service. You'll see things that'll change your life, and you'll be able to share with others to build their faith. It's just, that's what we do. We always look for gatherings we can go to where we can really get fed. We go to church a lot, up here. We go to Wednesday service, Sunday service, but we go out of the area. We drive distances. We fly to places because we're able to. Many people can't, but make the decision to put yourself around somebody that has an amazing ministry like Retah, who will pray over you. If you've got things you need, you want to get around mighty men and women of God that will do that. It'll really bless you, and it'll give you something that you can share with others. And so that's the only thing I wanted to share. Yeah, the last thing that I can think of. You got any more questions for me, Retah?
No, you bless me as you. It always bless me. Nice.
Love you so much. And look forward to seeing you again.
Yes. Last time when I saw January, it was freezing cold with you, snowing. Oh. And they live in the most beautiful. They live in the mountains. It looks like heaven, I'm pretty sure. Where they live, heaven has to be being something like that. But David, thank you again. Please send your love, our love, John and your family, and God's will, we speak again.
Marianne.
Love you guys.
Love you. Thank you for the opportunity to share.
Okay.